is on your screen.
Okay, something changed.
Mm-hmm. So, since this is your first call, please introduce yourself.
What would you like to know?
A general background and what practice you've had, what Dhamma you've known.
Okay, so my name's Martin. I'm 27 years old. I live in Germany. I've been practicing for maybe the last 2 years, but not very consistently, not very regularly. In the beginning, I started off using a lot of guided meditations from apps and stuff, like Headspace, that sort of stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with those kinds of apps.
Only a little bit.
Well, they do like very basic, short, like guided mindfulness meditations.
Yes, you don't have to describe them to me.
Okay. So, yeah, one of the problems I had in the past is that I found it pretty difficult to stick to practicing regularly. So I kind of got some motivation, practiced very diligently for a couple of months, and then kind of started to taper off and to kind of lose motivation. Yeah, so even though I've been practicing for the last 2 years, I still consider myself to be a beginner because it's been very inconsistent. Recently, I've been reading the book by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, With Each and Every Breath, and I've been following those instructions.
Okay. Yes, I know Thanissaro. I haven't seen him in about 20 years, but I know him.
Okay. Yeah. I've also read the book The Mind Illuminated by Culadasa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've previously been practicing with last year. But it didn't really work for me in the sense that I was having a lot of problems with it. And that's when I kind of had a very long break from like diligent practice. So I've come back in the recent weeks with strong motivation once again and trying to keep it up.
All right. So, based upon your readings with Thanissaro and Culadasa, you actually haven't done a retreat ever, I assume.
No, I actually tried to go on retreat. I booked a Goenka retreat because here in Germany it's not all that easy to find retreats because there never seem to be any open spots because apparently everyone wants to go on retreat. But I managed to get a spot for a Goenka retreat, but then due to work scheduling, I actually couldn't go and I had to cancel.
Okay. All right. Regardless of where the student does it, it's actually, let us say, of great fruit, great benefit to do a long, intensive retreat, partly because humans don't normally know the difference between the outside world and the inside world. They're all kind of mixed together and have been kind of mixed together throughout our whole lives. And so One of the ways that we can begin to determine what's on the outside and what's on the inside is by getting away from the outside and start
Yeah.
dealing with only the inside. This is the real value of the retreat, is to get into seclusion so that we can get away from everything. And in the process of doing that, when they get away from, let us say, the community, the people, the books, all the tools and weapons that we still haven't gotten it away with from it all, because we carry a lot of stuff along with us. And so students who try to uh, build a practice all on their own generally have exactly the same kind of situation that you do. Also, there is a problem with getting the right kind of information out of a book, because when the guy was writing the book, he was following a mental train that he had in that time. Then at a later time, somebody reads that book with a completely different mental stream, and much of the data, in fact, some of the most important one-liners are missed by the student, and that in that regard, the practice has in the West become, let us say, haphazard or shoddy, that we need to learn the intention of what is to practice and why to practice. And once we learn those things, that will be the motivation. And so another way of introducing this is that this is not about meditation, formal meditation, sitting meditations, all the kinds of things that you see with your eyes in a retreat, of people sitting around in silence, etc., like that. Really, what this is about is Dhamma. It's about how to live our lives, and in fact, psychology and neuroscience and medical and science in general is coming in the direction of the Dhamma. And within maybe the next 50 years, science will figure out what the Buddha figured out 2,500 years ago. But they're going in the right direction. But the problem with psychology is the business model. The business model in psychology is that the client comes in after an appointment. He makes a particular period of time that he has to pay for, and basically what winds up is that the client comes in as a victim and is paying the psychologist to fix him. The Dhamma is not that way at all. All of the work that needs to be done will be done by the student. And so it looks like that we might be able to do that with a book. But generally, if you can think of it like this, that psychotherapy, even though you're paying high dollar for a period of time with the teacher or with the psychologist, still, most of the time, progress is very slow. And the reason for it is because the students are not putting in the effort that it takes. If the student is motivated, they will, and then they'll make progress. All right, so getting the student motivated, you're right. You're hit on the right thing, that there is motivation. In fact, that motivation can be thought of as part of the Eightfold Noble Path, in the sense of right effort.
Okay.
One's right noble effort is right motivation. When there is motivation, okay. Now, in that regard, one's right effort, right noble effort, is not what most people think. Most people think when they hear effort, they mean strenuous effort or some kind of strain. The word struggle is time to use. Um, the word striving
Yeah.
is translated. Now, the word that actually is there is in the sense of persistence, in the sense of never mind, start again, keep coming back and coming back. One's right effort is to often make a small change rather than with great effort at all in one time making a big change. This is all a very slow process, and that what we're doing is developing a skill. Now, skill development is true for meditation or for the Dhamma as well as almost any other thing, especially like music. And that what a lot of students will do with meditation is similar to a piano student who sits down in front of the piano and piddles. Or the other way of doing it is that the student has heard a very difficult but beautiful piece of music, and so now he wants to play that, and he doesn't have the skills for it. And so not only is he struggling, but he's wasting his time because he'll never be able to learn that piece of music because he doesn't even know, for instance, scale and fingering techniques. And really difficult music is all about fingering techniques. And so we have to learn the fingering techniques, and then we can learn to play the beautiful music. This is also true with meditation, and most students sit in front of their piano and piddle. They don't practice. Why? For two reasons. One is that they don't realize what the practice actually is, and they also um, don't have the motivation to do it. Now, in the Goenka retreat, and by the way, I spent several years with Goenka back in 1980, 83 time frame. And he had a phrase that he used on a regular basis. And that phrase I use on a regular basis too, and that is never mind, start again. This is the most important thing because it's got the entire Dhamma built right into it. Never
Okay.
mind, start again. The whole Dhamma is built into that one phrase, just like the entire Dhamma is built into the phrase that I have as a tagline on the emails. Don't worry, be happy. That's the entire teaching of the Buddha. Now, how would the Buddha say it in shorthand like that? The Buddha says he teaches only one thing, both now and before. I have taught only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha nirodha, suffering and the end of suffering. Hence, worry, don't worry, be happy, suffering and the end of suffering. Also, never mind is to never mind that the mind has wandered away, start again, come back, do it again. So, in the song of that in a line, it says, when you fall down, you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you start all over again. But mentally, what happens with most people is that when they fall down into bad feelings, then they'll wallow there. And they'll
Yes.
think, I need help to get up.
One
I'm a
thing that
victim.
one thing that I really experienced a lot, and that really I think was a main problem in my practice before, is exactly that, developing negative mental talk when I would notice that I wasn't on the breath, which of course happens about every 3 seconds. And instead of um, having that attitude that you just described, I would really get pissed off, get very discouraged, like, I can never do this, this is impossible, I will never get this, judging my own progress, judging my skill in a very negative way. And it's really, really hard to keep up motivation when you have that very strong negative mental talk. So
But that strong mental talk that you were doing before you recognized the mind is wandering away is the same energy that you come to when you do recognize the mind has wandered away, and now you're off into negativity for sure. This is the common way of practice, and this is why most people are failures, is doing exactly what you're talking about. This is why I'm bringing it up right away, right at the very
yes,
beginning.
yes,
And that in fact, it has to do with an attitude change. That we have to, at that point of contact, which I'll mention and go into detail with, at that point of contact, when you recognize that the mind has wandered away, that is a time to change the attitude that we have to have, because here's what we have. We have sati, which is to remember, and that we remember, or we can recognize or can see that the mind has wandered away from the breath. All right, so now is time for mental attitude. If you're actually going to, let's go back to the analogy of having fallen down, that we look back to see what we tripped on, and we blame that root or that mound of dirt or that brick we stumbled onto, instead of recognizing immediately, oh, I tripped and fell because I wasn't watching where I was going.
yes,
That's why we tripped. It wasn't the root's fault. It wasn't the brick's fault. Or if I step in a pile of crap, I stepped in it. The pile of crap was just there. It was minding its own business. We can't blame the pile of crap for having been stepped on. We did it. All right. So this is a major, major change of attitude, is from the attitude of victim, and in your case, being victimized by your own mind, to a winner's position. That's the real change of attitude. This is the second aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path. Right intention, right attitude. And so this is the point in time that you've got to change your attitude to a positive attitude, okay? And the positive attitude would be, instead of seeing the mind wandering away or having been wandered away for a long period of time or so, and then we say, oh, in fact, the very common language is monkey mind. Monkey mind. You probably heard that because it's centuries old. But it
yeah,
didn't go back to the time of the Buddha. The Buddha never talked about monkey mind. But the Asians in modern times and back for centuries will talk about the mind being a monkey mind. This is not the right attitude. It's not a monkey mind. We're just doing a put down, or we're saying that this meditation is hard. We're making it difficult, to where in fact it's actually very easy, but it needs to be done over and over and over again, because the normal state of the mind is to wander around in dark places. The dark places of the past, the dark places of the future, the dark places of doubt and worry, and the dark places of wanting things we don't have. And so if this meditator is sitting there wanting to be enlightened, he's saying, I'm doing this meditation in order to become enlightened. He's actually wanting something he does not have and is causing himself suffering by wanting to be enlightened. Wanting things that we don't have is suffering, but wanting is not motivation. Wanting is suffering. Motivation is coming from wisdom. All right, that you become motivated to come out of wrong view, because you're actually in wrong view when you say, oh, this is tough, oh, it's monkey mind, oh, this is so hard to do, etc., like that. That's wrong view, and we need to come out of that wrong view. So what happens is that when you recognize that the mind has wandered away, something new has happened, something marvelous has happened. And that is, for the first time, perhaps, or at least in this moment, the first time, you're recognizing that the mind, in fact, has wandered away. Because while before, the mind had wandered away and you didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So when you do recognize that the mind has wandered away, that's a good thing. And so you can come to it from the position of, aha, I caught you. I see you, mind wandering mind. Come back here. Okay? This is the new approach that you have to do. You have to start enjoying your meditation. If you don't enjoy your meditation, there will be no motivation.
Yes.
As you have experienced. All right, so in the Dhammapada, the Buddha talks about the Dhamma is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. We must keep track of that because normally what Western meditators do, especially in the beginning of their meditation, is that they suffer. It's not good.
Oh yeah.
All right, why is this suffering? Because they're not practicing correctly. Because if you practice correctly, then it will be good. And so automatically the students are practicing wrongly and they're not, and it's not enjoyable. And so they say, oh, well, I have to manufacture a false kind of motivation because the real motivation of I actually like this is
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah, I think that was the major problem for me before, even though Chuladasa in his book also really stresses enjoyment and relaxation, but I could just simply never do it. Like I would read the words and understand conceptually why it's important and why it's really hard if you don't have any enjoyment from your practice, and then I would try to do it and it would just not work. So that's why I'm really glad that I found the book by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, because he really stresses relaxing the body and breathing in an enjoyable way, like what breath would feel good right now in the body. And I've had some success having some enjoyment from that. So it's
Okay.
a lot better even now with just a few weeks in this style of practicing.
All right, now here's something kind of interesting. Here you have two books, and now you're online with people who have really weird names.
Yes.
Never heard anybody ever have a name like Thanissaro. In fact, you pronounced it wrongly. You pronounced it the Western way as Thanissaro, but his actual
Yes.
name is Thanissaro, which is
I
the
tried
Pali
to pick up
translation.
on your pronunciation. I hope I did somewhat of a acceptable job.
And Chuladasa has also been a monk. And Dhammarato. Okay, so these are names with people who are telling you to do something that nobody in Western society has ever said.
Yes.
Because this is not part of Western society, and so when you say that it's difficult, no, what that means is that your way of judging it makes it difficult. That we never told you that this was going to be something that you could do easily. That's why it's called practice.
Yeah.
All right. And what needs to be practiced is the joy of recognizing something new. That's what needs to be practiced. So every time the mind wanders away from the breath, that gives you, in fact, because it wanders away, that means that you've already gone back into the old way. You've gone back into the society. You've gone back into the past, back into planning, back into a mental suffering state where there is no way out. All right. That's one of the things that's really amazing about the teachings of the Buddha is that it does have a way to, let us say, deliver on the promise. But we in the West normally mistake the promise. We hear the promise, but because of our cultural background, because of what society, etc., thinks, we think that the goal is different because we've got our own confirmation biases built in. All right, and so we're mistaken about the goal, and then we become mistaken about how to reach the goal. because in the West we have to strive. In fact, everything is kind of a competition.
Yeah.
All right, and so I've seen, in fact, Western monks, not so much with Asian monks, but Western monks tend to compete with each other for spiritual whatevers. I'm better than you are because I know the sutta or whatever. All right, but the Dhamma is teaching to become non-competitive, to get out of competition completely, to stop even competing with your own idea of what your progress should be. The one way of saying it is that when people become satisfied with their progress, only then do they start making progress.
That's a lot easier said than done, I think.
Pardon?
That's a lot easier said than done. I certainly have
Oh
not
no, it's
managed it
really
up
easy to
until now.
do. It really is easy to do, but what we have to do is to stop doing what we have been trained to do. And that's to be hard on ourselves. We are trained to have expectations. We are trained to compete. Now what your job is to train yourself to enjoy yourself, to train yourself to enjoy this moment. So, in fact, the Buddha uses the breath because there's one thing about breathing. It always happens right here, right now. You can never watch a breath that you had when you were age 10. Not anymore. When you were at age 10, at that point in time, you can see that particular breath, but you cannot see future breaths. All right? But in the mind, we're always dwelling in the past or dwelling in the future. And so instead of thinking about this breath, we'll think about breathing in general. And so we have to take our frame of reference from past, future, society, etc., and bring it back down to this present moment. Where is the joy in this present moment? All right. So how we do that is, again, aha, I caught you wandering away. Never mind, start again. All right. This is how we start to practice. Now, what the intention is to get the mind fit for work. Now, many Westerners have the idea that to make the mind fit for work means that I have to go from one level of concentration to a deeper level of concentration to a deeper level of concentration. And you probably might have heard the word jhana. And so we think of jhanas as going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into concentration. That's what the Buddha did before he became enlightened, and that's not the path, and the Buddha knows that. And yet so many of the students that he had, when they would come from other teachers practicing jhana, practicing austerities, practicing the Brahma-viharas. There was an awful lot of stuff that was done in the time of the Buddha in the name of spirituality, religion, getting away from it all, etc., like that. And the Buddha became an expert in practically every field. He went from teacher to teacher to teacher, learned the lessons well, and was dissatisfied and disappointed with everything that he learned. So then he came and developed a new method, and that new method is based upon the Four Noble Truths, and it's also based upon Anapanasati. And as we work together, I'll show you how the Eightfold Noble Path and the Four Noble Truths fits directly in with Anapanasati, so that in a way it becomes, those two things become the same thing. In other words, you cannot practice Anapanasati correctly without practicing the Eightfold Noble Path. You can't do it. You have to have right intention, right view, right mindfulness, right effort. Okay, these four things run and circle around each other, but right view comes first. And right view comes when you have right sati, or mindfulness. Okay, now in English, we have come to use the word mindfulness because it is a word, I don't know why they started using that. Possibly it was a word that Goenka started using. In fact, there's a lot of words that are English language use that is used in Buddhist vocabulary, and they're used commonly in Buddhist vocabulary, but very rarely in the regular language. Okay, if that's the case, then we're not using the right vocabulary. We should be using the vocabulary of the Buddha, because the Buddha used only common language, and he did not have words reserved for something special. For instance, the word nibbana only means to cool off, to cool down. Okay, the way that a pizza pie comes out of an oven, when the pizza pie comes out of the oven, it's too hot to eat. Or how about a cobbler or a peach pie or something like that? Even a Black Forest cake, too not edible when it comes right out of the oven. It's got to cool off. All right. So you can think of the wandering mind full of hindrance is kind of a fire, a kind of an oven that the mind is in. And when we bring it out of an oven, then it will cool off. So Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about little Dhammanas. That's a new name for you, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, I actually listened to some of your recordings on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So I heard you talk about him.
All right, so you can Google Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa taught, and one of the first things to look at is his book on Nibbana for everyone. All right, where he talks about it in the sense that everybody has little Nibbanas, but they don't know it. Coming home from work and sitting down on the couch and taking a deep sigh, oftentimes will put a person into a Dhamma moment. He just will stop thinking about the day, he'll stop thinking about the world, and he'll just relax for a moment. And then the mind will start back up, and off he goes. And he doesn't recognize how delightful and curative that single moment was. But with mindfulness, we can begin to recognize those moments, those little Nirvana moments, and that's what we're going to start creating for yourself. So whenever the mind wanders away and you recognize the mind is wandering away, that recognition is what is called sati. And we use that word in many, many ways. In fact, it's possibly one of the most common words in all of the sutras is sati. We have the Satipatthana, Anapanasati. It's a factor of the Eightfold Noble Path. And ultimately, we will be practicing for Satipanya, to always remember to be wise, to take the wise way out, rather than the way that the habits have been teaching us. All right, so this is the right way of looking at it, is that we're going to use the Eightfold Noble Path as a noble path right from the very beginning, so that when you have right sati and you recognize the mind has wandered away, then that means you recognize that the mind is in wrong view. It's in the wrong attitude. So starting up meditation in wrong view is not going to be helpful. That's what you've been doing. You recognize that the mind has wandered away from the breath, but you haven't started the breathing meditation with right view. And you've been fussing at yourself and monkey mind, and that destroys your motivation. But if you start that with, aha, I caught you. There you are. You naughty little brain, you naughty little mind, you wandered away again. And so you take care of it like a happy, consoling old college professor rather than a nun with a cane. Okay, become a kindly old gentleman working with this baby's brain. Never mind, come back. Enjoy yourself.
It's almost like a very friendly attitude to yourself.
Exactly. But that's not the Western way. The Western way, especially Germans, is for you to be really hard on yourself. Well, guess what? The reason that that's there is because if you produce, then someone can take it. If you don't produce anything, then you're not of any value to someone else. And the someone else is the ones who made all the rules, laws, regulations. And so in time, we'll start recognizing that. But for right now, what you have to do is to make sure that you are no longer following the orders from the past, that you've got a new marching order now. And that marching order is to enjoy that breath. How can you make that breath enjoyable? It actually is within the sigh. Learn how to sigh. Learn how to take a long, easy, deep out breath. That's the way to start with your meditation, is learning to enjoy your breath. In fact, step 10 of Anapanasati is gladdening the mind. Now, I'm really glad to see that, in fact, that you've been reading Thanissaro and Culadasa, because there are other teachers who don't even tell the students this important point about change of attitude. Okay, now I'm talking about it in the sense of change. They say just to enjoy it, but now I'm pointing out to you that we're actually making a change of attitude. We're actually doing the Eightfold Noble Path. We're coming out of wrong view into right view, and we're having the right attitude of coming out of wrong view into right view, and we need the effort to do that. So this is one's right effort, but it's instantaneous. It's just like that. The effort is to change. Never mind, I like this moment. Okay? And so it's a very easy effort to do, but you have not been doing that ever before, so it's kind of foreign. And the normal habits of the mind is to go back into the swamp, to go back into the bog, to go back into the world, to go back into the past, to go back into its normal state. And what you have to do is to invite it out over and over and over and over again. And if you can enjoy that each time it happens, then you'll begin to build joy. Aha, I caught you again, come back. Aha, I caught you again, come back. Never mind, start again. Come back with joy, keep coming back. This is the way to practice. All right? And that the first thing that happens with a person that is a noble step on the path is to recognize that no matter how obstructed the mind has become, no matter what these hindrances are, I can clean them out. Take a deep breath and enjoy this moment. The moment of reality. Right now is real. Past is gone, not real. Future never was, never will be. Whatever plan you make, the reality will be different than that. In fact, there's the United States Army has a very, very famous thing that they teach their students in West Point, and that is all war plans end when you first meet the enemy. In other words, no matter how much experience that general has or how many battles he's planned out before, all of his plans are thrown out when he meets the enemy. Well, if that's true in warfare, you can also recognize that in fact our society with its competition is kind of a warfare. So all the plans that you make are going to fall apart. Better not to make plans. So when you catch yourself making plans, you can say, aha, there's some planning again. I see that stuff. I'm not going to get messed up with that. I'm going to be here now and enjoy the moment because it's real. This moment is the only real thing there is, what's happening right now. What makes it science is that at any particular time of here now, an experiment can be performed and it will always give the same results. Algorithmic, step-by-step sequence of events guaranteed to give the right result. And that guarantee is because it's happened over and over and over and over again. It's consistency. Here's an example. When Einstein was working with the general theory of relativity and working with gravity, he noticed, or he began with his mathematics to understand that gravity will bend space to where we know that light travels in a straight line. Therefore, light can only be bent if the space it's in is bent or curved. Now, it took actually, there's a long story about it, but it took them several years with loss of cameras and all kinds of things going to various places on the earth so that they could do an eclipse. Why was the eclipse important? Because when the eclipse happens, then the stars that are behind the sun, because if the sun is here and the light is coming in this direction and it comes along the sign of the sun, it's going to be bent because of the gravity, which means that the observer over here is going to see that star out there when in fact it's actually behind the sun. So at that point, that means around the sun, the stars that are around the sun are actually spread out like in a fish lens, that they're actually behind the sun. They cannot be actually seen except for the fact that gravity was bent. Now, this is what I'm getting at. Every eclipse that happens, many astrologists from universities all over the world will go all to that eclipse and do that same experiment over and over and over again. And it always works because the sun has gravity. This gravity that we're talking about is actually part of the real Dhamma. The real Dhamma is very simple. In fact, it's physical laws. And that the physical laws cannot be broken. All man's laws are artificial. The distinction is that the natural laws cannot be broken. All right, gravity, we cannot get around it. Electromagnetic, we use it. We know how it works. But we cannot destroy it or say, oh no, you cannot have that. That motor is not going to spin when I turn the power on. Okay, that the motor is going to spin unless the bearings have no oil and the friction is there, but it's always scientific. All right, so this is what the Buddha is, that the Buddha is first class mental science. That it is not religion, it is not society, and it's not a man-made law. It is the way the mind works, down to that level of science. So that means that everything that's happening in the here now is real, and that's what we're paying attention to, is what's real. But everything that we think about that happened in the past, no longer real. So in that regard, most humans spend most of their time in fantasy land. They spend most of their time in dreamland, and they're not paying attention to what's happening in the moment. And even when they do, it's almost always not real. It still has elements of confirmation bias, etc., and we'll talk more about that. But the important thing is this one point, that your job, like Chuladasa and Tanisaro have pointed out, your job is to change your attitude, or your meditation is not going to work. Because the meditation is all about learning to practice the Eightfold Noble Path, and you have to change your attitude, an attitude of ordinary right view into supramundane or noble right view. And the noble right view is, you can do this, and you know you can do it. And so the first step on the path will be when you recognize no matter how much the mind is obstructed, you can come back, you can throw that stuff out and come back to the present moment. And that makes you a champion, not a loser. Right now you've been practicing as a loser and you're having loser's benefits. But you can practice to become a champion with the champion's benefits. And what is the champion's benefits? The positive thing, I can do this. I can clean out the mind. And I know I can do it because I've been watching it happen over and over and over again. I keep cleaning out the mind and coming back, and now I know I can do it. Just like a scientific experiment. Every time you recognize that the mind has wandered away, you've got to perform that little scientific experiment of, aha, I see you. And now come back, not think about whatever it was in the past, and come back and watch the breath and enjoy this present moment. So that's how you have to work with it. And so the right way to work with the breath, what kind of breath is the right kind of breath? The answer to that is experiment and play with it so that you can find a pleasing, happy, satisfactory breath. Learn to work with the breath. Become to notice the breath. Notice that there's an in breath and an out breath, and that while you're watching the breath,